Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief, this Thursday edition. I'm joined at a later time of day than we usually record. That's why we all look so fresh right now. Joel, no, I'm not the really successful one, Schinnefeld. I'm Rawlings, from out in the Portland area. How are you, Joel?
Doing well, thanks.
How often do you get mistaken for the successful swimming Joel?
Well, I've had this face my whole life, so really, I don't get confused with better looking people that often. So yeah, that's
true. Joel Rawlings, talk about a man that just like cut from a sheet of granite, pure granite. Does he even age? Looks fantastic.
Schinnefield's just he's a good looking dude. Always looking like he's always got like that coaching shirt's always pressed well.
That's right.
Nice khakis. And there's me. It looks like I just found, like wrestled some homeless dude for his clothing so I could wear it to the meet that day.
And joining us from Speedo World Gulf Swimming headquarters in the Houston, Texas area, Erik Wyken. Erik, how are you?
Doing much better today, thank you.
Yeah, you got your second shot, right? You feeling okay?
I did on Tuesday, and yesterday was an interesting trip, to say the least. So,
I mean, like when you say trip, like were there psychedelic effects, Erik? Or
I wish I was stone cold exhausted for most of the day. I went from feeling like I was standing in a freezer for most of the day to feeling like I was out in the Arizona sun for about a few hours.
Yeah.
Everything felt like I just maxed out in the weight room.
Yeah.
And then by the time I woke up this morning, it was just the injection site. So the nano robots have moved their way into my system, and I am being fully tracked by the government.
That's awesome.
So,
that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. I'm so glad that you're on the same page with the rest of us in the indoctrination. So before we get into our first topic today, I actually have a surprise for you guys. You guys don't know anything about this, but we have a new sponsor for the Swim Brief. So I'm finally going to be able to deliver on those raises I promised you guys last year for helping me. And I'm going to go ahead and read an ad for this podcast. Sorry, for this sponsor. Just, they have very specific text that they want me to read. Okay. The Swim Brief is brought to you by Sun Yang's anti-doping hammer. Do you want to use PEDs and get away with it? Are you tired of pesky doping agents doing their job and collecting blood samples at your home? Try Sun Yang's anti-doping hammer. Using our patented glass break technology, Sun Yang's anti-doping hammer, that's a mouthful, guarantees the complete destruction of any vials containing your blood. Just place it in the hands of your most trusted security guard and bam, problem solved. Now I got a disclaimer here. Angry mother shouting at doping agents not included. Not available in the continental United States, Alaska, or Hawaii. These claims are not evaluated by the World Anti-Doping Agency, Craig Lord, or anybody really. So that's our new sponsor, guys. Sun Yang's anti-doping hammer. And use that as a segue to discuss, hey, maybe because of this hammer product, Sun Yang's going to be swimming in the Olympics. It's an article I read yesterday. Erik, you're shaking your head immediately. Do we have, and I want to give credit to Michael Schubert, listener of the podcast, who sent me this article yesterday and inspired everything here. And here's a question he wants to know. Do we have the perfect WWE villain for the 2021 Olympics in Sun Yang?
I could not agree more. And furthermore, none of this surprises me. Not one bit. Like if you told me to put odds on him being in Tokyo and swimming for China, I would probably say it's 80% likely.
So you never believed
that might be conservative.
So you never believed that any kind of infraction here was going to keep him from competing in the games.
No, the powers that be and the money that flows is just doing what it's going to do and does what it does. That's just kind of how things have happened in the past. And, I want to say this is, it's just, yeah, I really don't know what to say. I'm really kind of just floored and flustered with the whole thing. But China's gonna China. So
you're at like a 9 out of 10 on the outrage scale, as far as I can tell. Joel, where are you, with completely incensed at a 10 out of 10 and 1 out of 10 being completely indifferent?
It's I think on the scale, it's kind of like with pug dogs where they get so ugly it goes back to like kind of cute. Right. I'm like, I would be at the outrage, but I'm just like down to a 2 or 3 because it's not like
you're defeated
such a
almost.
shock, Yeah, and so I think actually the WWE is the perfect analogy because that's just all it seems to be now. It just adds to the theater of it all, where you're like, now, you're going to watch the evil empire of the Patriots play just because it was the evil empire back in the day with Tom Brady. Now it's like you're going to watch the East Coast bias again.
Oh, you're just striking a nerve there with the Patriots thing. I don't equate the Patriots with Sun Yang in any way. I don't understand that.
So I mean, it's one of those things where it creates more theater, where it'd be like, oh, I'm not going to watch the sport. And like, well, now I will watch the sport because you're sitting there, someone beat this dude. Just someone beat the dude.
Right.
But it's one of those where I'm reading the article and it's one where you have to keep like, 2 thoughts in your head at the same time. Yes, he's a cheat. Yes, the doping agencies are targeting, and so it's, of course they're going to figure out a loophole to get him in. He's still guilty, I believe, but they're just going to run it. And so someone's getting money. It's not me. It's like walking in every age group meet. I told Wyken about that. I would walk in 5 a.m. Everyone's got all these backpacks and suits and things. I'm like, man, someone's making big money off this meet. Sure, right. It's not me. Yeah. Same thing with this. Someone's probably making some money somewhere. They're getting the guy in. Again, it's like I'm back to a 2 on the outrage scale because it's like, yeah, what a surprise.
I guess where I'm at is I'm of course, like the two of you, if this is an inevitable thing, I am hoping that he just gets his butt kicked in Tokyo, and that'll give me something to cheer for. I feel bad for anybody that's competing that, is doing so 100% on the level. Like, it's got to be demoralizing on some level, right, to see something like this and wonder, by the way, like, here's somebody that really, it feels like they got caught dead to rights, and yet it doesn't have, the punishment has no teeth, especially when you consider it in the context of the Olympics. And I'm going to circle back to this topic here at the end, because I think there's a whole nother angle of this that unfortunately has to do with the COVID pandemic and what's been possible testing wise within the past year. And it's almost one of those things where when I think about it, I start getting really upset, and you almost, like, in order to stay motivated to coach and follow the sport and do everything else, you can't think about it like all the time, or else you will just sort of, I don't cross over into the pug zone. I just start to spiral. So I've got to be able to put it away at times. All right. So we've talked about that. Let's talk about the transfer portal. And I want to introduce this by pointing out that yesterday I read, according to Braden Keith in a Swim Swam comment section, and you can all make your Snickers about me reading a Swim Swam comment section, but our University of Arkansas has 12 swimmers in the transfer portal. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, does Neil Harper is he on to something where swapping out your roster, or at least half your roster in the off season, is sort of the key to moving up in the SEC? What do you think, Joel?
That's an interesting thought there. I've been kind of just reading up on the transfer portal, especially like after Roy Williams went nuts, and he's like, that's it, I'm done. Because he's like, I've got to keep on recruiting. I've got to recruit my own athletes to say. Now I got to recruit transfer athletes coming in. And at some point it's going to bleed into swimming, I think. And so, yeah, the guy's got, flushed the toilet, got a whole new set of cards, whatever analogy you want, I guess. But with the transfer portal, I thought the interesting part was the amount of paperwork it used to be where the kids, we would get calls as college coaches and be like, I'm interested in transferring. Like, well, I can't even call this person back. I can't do anything because I have no idea if they're being released. The transfer portal is nice in that it opens things up. But from what I read, as soon as a kid's in the transfer portal, now that coach, like you said, doesn't have to honor those scholarships. Like, well, at the end of the semester, all your scholarships are gone. You've entered the transfer portal. So it can really be quite detrimental, obviously, to the student athlete. It's positive in that it opens transparency up. But also, I think it's just going to be interesting on so many levels with it's going to show that one of the reasons you can leave is egregious behavior, which is, I believe, what a lot of these athletes were going under. The other is like, you're not going to be able to participate at a certain level. So like, especially these younger athletes coming in, they're getting recruited as sophomores coming in, say you're a breaststroker, like, okay, I've got a spot on a relay. And then all of a sudden you find out when you're there, you don't have a spot. You're not going to get on the conference team. I'm using breaststroke as an analogy because usually they can do 100 breast, 200 breast. They got a relay and then, all right, let's just do a 50 free.
Or 200 IM or whatever. Definitely not a 500.
Yeah. And so usually, like, again, if you don't have a relay spot, you might not be going to the conference meet, or you might, as a conference moves faster, maybe you won't get a chance. And so there's another opportunity to transfer out as well. And so I think as it gets more popular with basketball, I think swimming kind of will follow that as well. Where you're going to get a lot of people starting to enter that, but then the consequences, they could immediately lose their scholarship, especially with this 5th year. I mean, I wonder how it's going to work if you've got a lot of scholarships promised out and you got a lot of athletes who, hey, we scored a lot of points, we're going to come back one more year. Who's going to get left out without the money? Because there's not that many scholarships out there.
Yeah, I definitely think you got a good point there in terms of the instability of kids committing so early. And I do believe it's going to have a downstream effect if you have kids committing way earlier, and then you have the ability to transfer being easier than it was in the past with less. There, of course, they have the downside of, that once you sort of enter the portal, there's no it's really a one-way portal, like you gotta find another place to go to, because it's very hard to go back.
Yeah,
you do something like that. And so I do think we're going to see a lot more instability, and we're seeing something even more, I think, in this particular offseason, because you have all sorts of people that have been granted an extra year of eligibility, but may have finished college, and are considering, like, do I want to go to grad school somewhere? Or maybe they didn't quite finish, like, let me see how many courses I can take to stretch out another year of school. Or on the other end, saying, like, I'm not going to use that extra year of eligibility. It's just creating a lot of instability across. Do you think that's a good thing, Eric? Do you think net that the transfer portal is a positive or not?
I think so. I think it's good for the kids to be able to have that option. And you look at a lot of the kids who are coming that are making headlines as far as jumping into the portal and things like that. If they're not a power player on a given squad, or they don't have a lot of money, or if they just have books, or they were the 2nd or 3rd breaststroker, and now after a recruiting class, they're the 5th, and they're not going to see the light of day of competition at a conference team, then you start to like, well, I want to swim at a conference meet. Let's just see what else is out there. And realizing that after your freshman and sophomore year, you're still doing a lot of gen eds. You're not going to lose a lot of credits until, maybe you get into your 3rd or 4th year. You've kind of established the path that you're going on. But I disagree. I disagree with Roy Williams' comment about having to recruit your own kids. Like, if you're doing your job, you don't have to recruit them. If you're recruiting past them, if they're willing to work and stay with you because you're a great coach, you're going to stay there. To say that, that would be like Eddie Reese. Like, he's got all those guys sticking around. They're not going anywhere. He's doing their job. That culture is established. And it's just a matter of these athletes, student athletes, exercising their now kind of right to explore this opportunity, because they did make a commitment as a sophomore and we look at, something like a lot of the recent releases, hirings, firings, what have you, before Gary Taylor got onto campus, some of the kids that committed to that program as sophomores, by the time they would get on campus, it's a whole new staff, and half the kids that they met on a recruiting trip are gone. It's just, right. I think it only makes sense that they have this opportunity to see what else is out there, and then to avoid some of that weirdness should there be a staff member that holds it against them. And not all staff members are like that on college campuses, but it does remove some of that intimidation factor where they can just apply for that opportunity to go elsewhere. And then for coaches who are looking for those athletes or need something and they have a landing spot for them, there's so many schools and so many programs and so many kids looking that, yeah, it's a fantastic thing. And especially for those graduate students who graduate early, they end up with that fourth year and can go somewhere else for master's degree. I don't see too many negatives in the situation as it's presented. So,
yeah, I think it's a definite improvement. And I mean, I say that as, I would just even put it in context. I mean, Eric, you were somebody that swam in college and your program got cut, and I'm guessing you got granted an unconditional release because of that cutting. I was on the side of it where I sat in a room with an athlete that was denied a release when I was at Georgia Tech. And believe me, the prior system, you as a coach had way too much power to basically be fickle and just say like, well, I don't like this person, and therefore I will make it really painful for them to leave.
Yeah, I would have loved to have had that transfer portal, to have my name in there. In hindsight, being 2020, I didn't know anything about anything. I knew I wanted to swim D1, and the reality is, after my sophomore year, what I should have done is looked beyond that. I kind of went without guidance, and I didn't really seek it out. And I should have been looking at D2 and D3 schools and looking to see what I can do and an impact on, say their NCAA team or something like that. Seeing where I could go elsewhere, because it doesn't, at that point, hindsight being 2020, if I could speak to myself then, be like, hey, there's nothing wrong with being a D2 or a D3 All-American.
You could have gone to a D3, like a great D3 state school back home.
Yeah, like Stevens Point.
Yeah, or Eau Claire. I think lacrosse is pretty good.
Dominant institutions, yes. Those are excellent choices. Very good choice.
Definitely not Whitewater. Whitewater's no good. So
no, out in the cornfield.
Yeah. All right. And then today we decided we're going to share some workouts. It's workout Thursday. This should be workout Wednesday. But just imagine it was a day ago, everybody, as you're listening to this, right? This is something we did, I don't know, about a month ago, could have been 2 months ago. Time has no meaning. While
3 weeks ago.
Is it 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
All right. A month was pretty close. Okay. And we promised we would revisit it again. We were going to do it last week, and then only Eric was prepared to do it.
The only thing that I'm actually really good at preparing for. Everything else is just kind of like,
don't downplay yourself,
said.
Eric. You're the secret producer of this podcast. He does a lot of work to help come up with topics.
Yeah, is that why my salary is doubles, Joel?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You weren't supposed to mention that.
I've been underpaid for years. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. 0 times 2 is still 0.
You get what you deserve, Joel. Okay.
I do.
I am. I'm gonna get a screen share going here. I'm actually gonna lead this one off. Oh my gosh.
You're gonna edit this part out for the sponsorship. You can put a picture of a hammer up and then go right to the workout. There you go.
Okay. So this is a race-paced workout that I've zoomed in on, so you can't actually see the set itself. Okay. Here we go. That I've done actually a version of this probably the last 2 weeks. And the goal here was that I I've got a group of swimmers that are transitioning to a long course season. We had a short course meet here at the end of April that I rested kids that I was coaching for. We did a 2-week rest, shaved, put on fast suits, went for it. And then we've got a long course meet 4 weeks after that. And we're just sort of like building the long course schedule, of course, as we go because of COVID. But, you know, a lot of the kids that I coach don't typically swim the long course season, but I've got some of them that are interested in going for long course. So one of the things I wanted to do, because I don't have access to any long course water, and I'm just thinking about, you know, short course practice, race pace, what can I do, is I wanted to get some repetitions at a little bit of a longer distance without really changing the overall volume. So, you know, if you look at the warm up, got a basic 400 there. Count descend is just, you know, swimmer golf, right? Seconds plus stroke cycles. This is all freestyle everybody's doing. And then we get into this set, six rounds. You go 425s at 100 pace. And then basically you do your best to match that. I mean, I have had conversations with you guys on the 75. You do your best to match that. I had a conversation with you guys. I was trying to get them to do a 50 at 100 pace, which is extremely hard. It's again, more of a motivational thing for them to get into some kind of rhythm on the 25s and then see how close they can get on that 75. Nobody got to 3/4 of their 100 pace. But what they did do is they were able to sort of swim the first 50 of that 75 in a similar rhythm to the way they're doing the 25s. And then when they flipped, what I told them as I was coaching the set was, when you flip at the 50, I want to see you change something in the way that you're swimming so that you actually try to change speeds, you know, whether it be increasing a stroke rate, increasing leg drive, something like that. Play around with that stuff to see. And actually a number of them were really successful. I think finished their 75s really well. And then we got the active recovery at the end. Yes, we are using John Urbanchek's color system. So this is basically a low level, lowest you can go aerobic kind of stuff for active recovery. And then the swim down actually incorporates, we're going to have a breaststroke themed practice the next day. So one of the things my boss here, Paul, has taught me to do is put a little basically transition from a swim down into the next day's workout. So having them do a couple, you know, double pullouts and then get up and swim. All right. Any questions?
No, I think it's good. I like the idea that he said, as far as like trying to kind of create almost kind of a cyclical or loops within a learning of a practice where you have something leading in tomorrow. Cause that's what I've always hated about when you see these kind of workouts on a page where it's like, you know, how does it fit in, not just the big scheme of things, but into that week of things. And so it's nice when you see workouts that have like something that's going to lead into tomorrow as well, where you, especially like on a, like you said, on not a throwaway set, but a set at the end where you're like, all right, we can kind of work on some things and then let's see it tomorrow a little fresher, a little crisper. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say probably if I have reflective on my own, like what I've been working on this year as a coach, I would say the biggest area I've improved in is planning. I had to confess to Paul at the beginning of the year that I'd never written a season plan. In fact, I bragged many times in my life about not writing a season plan, and he wanted me to write a season plan. So I made a season plan. And it has definitely helped me to be a bit more organized. And I would say the other thing that's different is like, I'm doing the same or similar practices, you know, tweaked here or there, sometimes on the same day of the week for several weeks in a row. And I think, you know, my inner coach screams sometimes like, oh, that's super lazy to do that. But I don't think that that's true. I think that I'm actually doing it quite thoughtfully. And I want to see sometimes, because sometimes you write a practice and the kids, the first time they do it, they don't really learn how to make it work for them. You know what I mean? And like, I just think like giving them a few attempts. And if you think that it's a good practice is good. And then yes, maybe you'll move on to one thing or another, but I've had a good experience basically repeating. So this says 428, but last night, Wednesday, we did this whole practice almost with no changes to it. All right, I'm going to go to Eric's workout here. Whoa.
You can't even see it all.
Jeez.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. Please make sure to share that with everybody as we go through. Maybe link it. I don't care if you want to.
Okay. Okay.
Just do whatever you want. So I just have a little bit of a preface going into all of this. So you can see there are. You can see the top end of some of the sets that are on the bottom. There are 6 different sets. This is actually a majority of the practice. So you see some of the times. Each of these sets takes 25 minutes. There's 2 minutes between each of the sets, and there are 3 sets for an athlete to do. This was done in January of 2019 while I was with the Woodlands. We practiced at a natatorium, and given the time of the practice that we had, I had the luxury of space to be able to do this. In January is the beginning of what is known as kind of a gauntlet of Texas high school state championship qualifying. There's a district championship, there's a regional championship, and then there's the state. So district qualifies for regional, regional for state. There are a couple of weeks. There's a week in between each meet. So some of this stuff is a matter of giving the kids opportunities to work on other things that they might need to. The other thing that happened with this is in relation to the entire season. In starting in September, we sat down and had a conversation where this particular senior group was our top senior group, and they were all given the opportunity to guide their taper. So if they were fully committed to it, they could start their taper whenever they wanted, and I would just write the practices within it. I would still give guidance. They would ask questions. Some of the kids were super dialed in, so this was really easy for them. Then we just would kind of play within sets as they go. Other kids needed more guidance. Other kids wanted me to write just tell them what to do the entire fall. But what that did was it created a real sense of autonomy from practice to practice. So as we got to this point, a lot of the kids were making the decisions for specific sets based on their actual needs. So an IMer whose third best stroke was breaststroke, one of those sets, they actively chose it. So a lot of the kids weren't necessarily just choosing a set because they thought it might be easier, because none of them were super easy. But it's the idea of really giving all of these kids an opportunity to do more of what they want, knowing that at the end, they were the ultimate guide to themselves and taper. So it was, if I want to do this, if I want ownership, I got to put the effort in. So and then lastly, it was really the impetus was I wanted to do this backstroke set with my top backstroker. Being a backstroker myself, a little bit of a homer there with that. I wanted to see how he would manage the set and how he might challenge himself. So a lot of this is very generic in terms of amount of time in some of this stuff, or might be actually very specific in number of reps. So gave him 16 minutes to do as many 200s as he could on 20 seconds rest. The odds were literal even split. So it was 100, 300 back, trying to go the same 100. And then the evens were literal negative split. So it was up to him to decide how fast he could go. But because of the length of the rest, it kept it more aerobic. Then he ended up kind of trying to challenge himself on the back end of the set, knowing that it was almost done, that we'd go through and be able to handle this stuff. Now, I refrained from coaching the swimmer. I did this set in January 19. The swimmer, I stopped coaching twist at the end of that summer. So now this same swimmer maybe doing this set now would be different. 142.9, 200 backstroke. So this by no means is where he was then, but he was trying to understand how to do those bigger races much faster. And this was the attempt to try to start that thought process behind that. And then to finish with some speed work, because to do all that hard aerobic stuff, you want to be able to do some short, fast stuff, get things going. With the fly, trying to get some drill up front, trying to look at more of an up-tempo fly and connecting the catch to the body with some of that drill, and then keeping the fly aerobic and manageable with the breakdown of those 25s. I had a fair number of kids who were 200 flyers here that really kind of connected with this set well. And if their strokes were suffering, we would knock it down to 25 flies. So just keeping an eye on them and their technique and what they're doing. Mid-D free was thinking more about the 1,000, just giving them something aerobic, but then something to look at in terms of how the set might apply to a race. So descending the 300s into a fast 100 and then doing some 500 pace on the end. Breaststroke, the weird kids, they like to be able to work on their pullouts. So we did some aerobic swim on the front end, being able to do pullouts everywhere and just going into some kind of quick turns into that breaststroke pullout without making them do a lot of slow breaststroke swim. Just by putting it in there a bit, we were getting more quality breaststroke within the aerobic set. And then the 25s were just to hammer home the idea of doing a better job of timing into turns. So try to swim fast, relatively speaking, but it was more important that they finish on a full stroke than they go all out. The IM was focusing on transitions. If you want to scroll a little bit, Chris, so they can see that a bit. The IMs were more so on a transition. 675s took a bit of explanation. So the odds were a 50-25, the evens 25-50. So 50 fly, 25 back, then even was 25 fly, 50 back, and did that for back breast and breast free. So descending 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and 5 to 6, just getting things moving a bit, and then a bit more stronger swims on the hundreds, and then getting into some of their worst stroke in terms of getting some speed work into that worst stroke, and then doing a little bit of technical work as not active recovery and drill, but just give them a moment to not have to go so fast. And then the freestyle set was really an attempt to trick the kids who called themselves sprinters into doing some aerobic work. Oftentimes there's that moan and groan of a 50-100 kid who doesn't want to do 20 or 30 100s, even though, there's going to be some validity to that maybe to them. So giving them some shorter distances and giving them enough repeats to be able to do some speed stuff. And some of the distance freestylers would jump down to this set after that to give them an opportunity to do more 200-100 focus. So in the end, I wish I could give you the context and where it was in the week, but this was the bulk of the swimming within that practice, and there was an underwater dolphin kick set that followed this that everybody came back together on and did the same. So there's a lot there.
Erik, I have one big question, and then I got to go to Joel because we have a hard stop here in a few minutes. But
sorry,
I'm really curious about, because like if you look at the practices I'm giving right now, like I don't allow for near this level of autonomy, and so some part of that is just a product of the experience level of the swimmers I'm coaching. So I did give quite a bit more autonomy, for instance, when I was coaching Division I kids at Georgia Tech. But something that I ran into a lot, you say like some kids really latch on to the autonomy, they take it, they run with it. What do you say to that kid who comes to you and goes like, because every time I tried to introduce like, some measure of choice, right? I always had a one or two or several kids that would go, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. And this was upsetting to them. This was like anxiety inducing, looking at a page like this? What did you say to them?
It became a bit more of kind of a surreal brief Q&A. Be like, you see a set like this, just tell me what to do. Be like, well, you know, what do you think is best for you right now? Or, is there any stroke that you feel you need to put more work into right now, especially the kids who were able to get into the IM? I mean, all the kids are doing IM, but, freshmen, sophomores specifically, when they have that question, I was like, well, I would tell them one component of this practice, like give them that, be like, well, your best event is 1650. I think at the very least we should do that 1,000 focus set, and then that kind of reduce the anxiety a bit and be like, well, what else do you want to work on? So tell them that one thing to do, and then help guide them through the choices for the other two sets, and then you just kind of starting them on that path of making those choices, but not just completely leaving them high and dry because they are anxious about that kind of thing. Sorry, I took all your time, Joel.
Yeah, we asked for a drill, not a dissertation.
All right, Joel, you've got like 2 minutes from when I start sharing this screen to tell us everything we need to know. And I just had to stop screen sharing so I could open it in my email, and not everybody would see all my other emails. So.
Yeah, mine's, I thought a fairly simple one. I've seen you guys doing all of the race pace stuff, so I thought it just a regular old, here we're swimming kind of a deal. So I drew up a 400 IMers kind of a set, and this would be like around the middle of the season. Like in the beginning of the season, we'll do a lot of like, straight fly, back, breast, just kind of working on strengthening those strokes. But then in the middle to late season, we start working more on transition. So I didn't write a warm-up. We would change the warm-ups a lot, as far as sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, so kids could figure out where they're at and what they need to warm up rather than what they think they need to warm up. And one thing though is, obviously if you're doing a swim practice, you see 400 skips written on the board, you can disregard the rest of the practice because obviously that coach didn't put that much effort into it anyway. So like you go, so you start out with the 400
shots fired at skips.
So 400 free IM. So you're just not doing fly in the front end because it's going to be a longer set, a lot of endurance. And I didn't like seeing short axis strokes becoming kind of like breath dominated, where they're all about breathing and not about, staying flat on the surface in speed. So we just start out kind of an endurance swim, free back, rest free. Then they go into 4 100s. First 100s fly, then fly back, then 50 fly, 50 back, then 25 fly, 75 back. And just being sharp on the transitions, really, because I think that's the thing you see a lot in the IMers is if you time it by 25, usually the first 25 off of like the long axis to short axis, long axis, that first 25 is usually one of the slowest ones. And I think it has something, just a theory, is like it has something to do with the nervous system, just kind of like reorganizing and getting into that. So this is kind of focusing on that where they're tired. And then you're really focusing more on the transition than you are on just the swim. Then you finish out 425s, working on the kick out and just getting 3 cycles, fast fly, flat on the surface, then turn recovery. And so that pattern keeps on going through. So next time instead of a 400, they'll do a 300 IM. So it's going to be stroke free stroke. So like fly free fly, back free back. Again, just working on going short axis to long axis, and just being sharp with that. Then 4 100s, same as before, fly around, but it's all going to be back to breast, especially backstroke to breaststroke, working that pull out and kind of doing a lot of self-talk through the breaststroke where they're working on, I've got air, I can get to the pull out, stay calm. I think sometimes kids will get into kind of a panic state when they're a little bit out of breath. And then the 425s, back kick out into a smooth transition to the surface tempo, meaning that I don't want to look like the Hunt for Red October surfacing at the end of the film where they dive up and then they flop down back on the water. Then the next couple rounds is going to be straight 200 IM fast, and then right into breast free, same focus again as before. Then the breaststroke pullouts, just again really talking them through how you want the pullouts to go, kind of working on self-talk through it and getting flat to the surface. Then 200 recovery. Then the last round is going to be 100 IM. And then this round, the 4 100 is going to be focusing on the endurance of the 400 IM, working on that kind of pace that you want to see at the back end. So all the intervals just would adjust so that the front end's more endurance. In the back end, now that they're kind of tired, getting them thinking about speed. And so again, when they're tired, kind of getting them tired, you have to get them tired in butterfly to be good butterflyer. I think you can get them tired in freestyle and do some pretty crisp butterfly where they're still inside the chemistry is going to be different, and then they got to kind of deal with all that's going on. So I think in the end it ends up being like 3,800 yards or something like that. If there's if you're going long course meters, like you said, just adjust like 125s instead of hundreds, just throwing different distances at them so that when they get in the meet, they hopefully it's more about the pace than about being 50 meters kind of thing.
All right. Well, thank you, Joel. And we're gonna.
Was that 2 minutes?
No, it's a little bit more, but you're going to have to wrap anyway. Thanks everybody for listening. We have no time for final thoughts this week. Go Google New York Times anti-doping. That was what I was going to talk about. So you got it all covered. And thanks to you guys for joining me, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Nice.